everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar about how to improve students' literacy skills with family engagement. Big Universe is thrilled to sponsor this program and to support teachers and librarians around the world with unlimited access to 11,000 plus leveled ebooks for every K-12 subject. Before we get started, I'll just review a few quick housekeeping items. We will be accepting questions throughout the webinar, and we'll hold a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. You can go ahead and send in your questions to me as they come up using the questions feature in your control panel. Just type your question into the box, hit send, and I'll put it into the queue to be answered during the Q&A. If you experience any technical difficulties during the presentation, please use that same question feature to get my attention, and I'll do my best to resolve the problem for you. We will be sharing a recording of the webinar as well as the presentation slides with you after the webinar today. So keep an eye on your email inbox for details on how to access those materials. Now let's get started. I'm pleased to welcome today's speaker, Rashawnda Daniels-Atkinson, a longtime educator who is currently teaching at a not-for-profit private school in Virginia. Rashawnda has a master's in education in curriculum instruction with an emphasis on leadership from Concordia University, Portland, a BS in elementary education from North Carolina A&T State University, and a certificate in the arts from Macquarie University in Australia. She has experienced both teaching and management experience in public, private, and government education programs, with most of her hands-on experience coming from working in urban communities and with underserved populations. Rashawnda has done research and formal presentations on various education-related topics, including toxic leadership, integrating faith and work, and preparing teachers for cultural diversity. In addition to being a classroom teacher, she is also currently an independent consultant for a children's publishing company, a blogger for Big Universe, and the founding chairperson of the Young Entrepreneurs Expo of Woodbridge, Virginia. Reading is not only one of Rashawnda's favorite things to do, but it's also an avenue that she believes opens opportunities for anyone to achieve their dreams by inspiring them to act on their goals. In the spare time that she has, which I don't think is much, Rashawnda enjoys being a wife and the mother of 3 young children, writing poetry, being one with nature when it's not too hot, and watching classic TV. We're really pleased to have Rashawnda with us here today and to take some time out of her very busy schedule to join us. We've got lots to learn from her, so I'm going to go ahead and hand the program over to her.
Hello. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to speak with you today and to learn about something that I'm very passionate about, which is family engagement. So this is what we're going to cover today. We're going to cover what authentic family engagement looks like. We're going to talk about the barriers to creating a culture of family involvement and ways to overcome them. We're also going to talk about how you can incorporate it in your individual classrooms, ways that schools can reach out to families, and also things that parents can do at home to help strengthen that family engagement process through literacy. And then after that, we'll take a couple of your questions. So let's get started. So before we talk about ways to improve family engagement, we need to define what family engagement is. And you see the definition on the screen. It talks about empowering and engaging families. And the key point, according to Ferlazzo and Hammond's 2009 book, is the shared decision making. And a note, all the sites and articles and research that I quote, there's an attachment at the end of the presentation so that you can either link to the articles yourselves or purchase the materials that I refer to. So if you're interested, that will be listed at the end of the presentation slide as well, okay? So again, family engagement, it's really important that we focus and distinguish that from just involving parents in schools. So when we're talking about engagement, we're not talking about more than just reading programs, coming to volunteer, reward programs, and just being active in the classroom. That's family involvement, and that's parents doing things to their children as opposed to doing things with our children. And what we want to do is we want to build partnerships and not have them view us as a customer, from a customer mindset, as us providing services, but as a partnership so that they see themselves integrated in the learning process. Family engagement transforms us from that service-based mindset to partnership, again, when approaching students and their families. And engaging families throughout the grades is essential to making sure students have the best opportunities for succeeding. Um, we want to make sure that families feel welcome from the time that their children come into a preschool or kindergarten classroom all the way through the last few days of their high school experience. So why does family engagement even matter? Research shows that, especially in multicultural and immigrant communities, family engagement influences student success, as Reynolds and Beckman's 2015 articles discovered in studying families with high school students. When caregivers buy in, they then begin creating the environment and accessing tools to the best of their abilities to ensure their children succeed. As educators, we have to be sure that we don't view how parents engage their children in the school through our own biases or assess the commitment levels of parents based on previous ideas or experiences. And what I mean by that is my generation, we had a different way of interacting with the school. A lot of times parents would just drop us off and say, hey, here you go, do what you have to do, we'll come back and pick you up. Some school cultures were having parents in the classrooms all the time as volunteers. And when I left from my small town in the Virginia Beach area to come to the Washington, D.C. area, which is where I currently live and had all my teaching experience, it was a big adjustment because family engagement was very different from what I was accustomed to. I was accustomed to my mom coming to the school and eating lunch with me, different things like that, whereas here, you have parents who have very high-level jobs or multiple jobs, and they may have different ways of engaging their students, and all of that is valuable. So I've had parents who were really using the time for commuting to travel to read to their students, check on their day, see how they were doing. I had grandparents and other family support system people come in and stand in the place of the parent if they couldn't be there. And so we have to kind of expand our mindset in terms of what that engagement looks like. Also, parents who are involved in their children's life or any caregiver, they also tend to have higher grades and they're ready for school better. The attendance is higher, the attendance rate is higher, and their behavior is improved, according to Edelson's 2013 study. They are generally more active in activities outside of the school. They tend to feel better about themselves, and they tend to avoid poor behavior choices such as substance abuse, according to Kreider's 2007 article. This is true, and it doesn't even matter whether they had prior negative success in school, whatever their child's background is, whatever that child's academic history may be, or even the parents' academic and social economic status. All of those things don't matter when the families are authentically engaged in the learning process. And also, what you don't really have to do is you don't have to wait until the child is in middle school or high school. That engagement process can start at a very early age and bring benefits as early as preschool. And there's a study at the end of the presentation that I refer to. It's called Van Horace. That 2013 study gives you more information about how even early elementary educators can benefit from family engagement. Okay. All right. So now, okay, so now what we're going to do is talk about some of the barriers that we tend to face when authentic family engagement is built. So now that we've talked about what that could look like, we're going to talk about some of the barriers to it and also focus on the importance of why these barriers and addressing them exist. So we have school environment, and a lot of times when we think of school environment, it may not necessarily be just that individual teacher, but it may be it includes the school reputation, the fear of not belonging, or previous bad experiences that the families have had with schools. It could also be the organization of how the school is set up itself. So if, for instance, if you're walking into a school and the lights are dim, no one's there to greet you, or there's no signs to kind of like direct you in a way that you need to go to the office and different things of that nature, it can actually communicate a signal that these families aren't welcome. So that's something that we need to keep in mind. Also, culture, language, generational, and SES differences. Communication in that way can be very difficult. This was one of my biggest challenges living in the area where we have so many people from around the world coming and receiving educational services throughout the DC area. And ways of communicating with caregivers can be challenging if the lack of resources or accessibility exists. And if you grew up in a place where, like me, where you grew up in a different region, or if you moved to, even from a different country, to come to the United States to teach, or if you move to another country to teach, these types of things can actually be a hindrance as well. Perceived time commitment. Sometimes families may think that being engaged requires you to be on the PTA board, come to every school event, volunteer X number of hours in the school, and that may be intimidating for them because they're looking at their other commitments in their lives. While those things are great, there's different ways that we can engage them that can take something as small as 5 minutes a day that would help them to not feel as disconnected from the learning process. And then the last one I really want to highlight is the knowledge and training deficit. And that training and knowledge deficit doesn't just apply to teachers. I came across many parents who wanted to help their children, but they lacked some of the basic tools due to schooling challenges they experienced, or generational difference in how subjects were approached. My background was very strong in mathematics, and with having to transition from what was called the new school math from the old school math, teaching it and having learned it a different way was a challenge for me. But then communicating that to parents who even learned it from a different way than I did, they had a difficulty of understanding. So I would find times where we would work together to try to teach them ways and strategies that they could help their kids so that they would feel empowered and confident enough to assist them with any homework or projects or challenging matters that they would face. And so, why are we talking about barriers to authentic family engagement? Well, if you don't recognize and address these barriers, and these are just a few of the barriers that I wanted to highlight today, if we don't address those, it can actually curtail the growth of healthy classroom and school culture, and that can impede on cultivating that engagement with families as well as academic success. So here are the suggestions that I came up with for overcoming family engagement barriers. A lot of these are ones that I've seen in action or I've done myself. The biggest thing that I want to highlight is actively affirming the roles caregivers have in the life of students, the school, and community. When parents and families feel like you want them there, they will come. If they don't feel as if they belong, or if they feel that it's only for certain groups of families or certain types of families, then they may be more apprehensive to participate and contribute feedback. And as educators and leaders in schools, we need that feedback in order to be able to improve the experience for all of our children. Another thing that is really helpful is having fact-finding meetings. One of the things that I used to do in the beginning of the school year is I would sit down with like families, even if they could come up to the school, that would be great. If not, I would have a phone call chat with them and just talk to them about their kid. Talk to them about how they approach behavior challenges, some of the things that they noticed about their children, and I wouldn't, say anything positive or negative. I would just, affirm that their perspective and thank them for the information. And when you get that information from the caregivers, it kind of helps you to know how to approach that student um, in a way that they may be comfortable with and also that has been successful. Also, we can no longer rely on traditional means to reach out to families exclusively. So the flyers coming home and the robocalls, all of those things are great, but we're going to have to modernize and just triangulate different types of connection efforts um, in order to continue to be successful. Excuse me. You also may have to reach out to different specialists in order to get people involved. So if you're a teacher and you have a parent who English may not be their first language, you may need a translator. And depending on your school district, that might take several weeks or some time to set up. You have to put in a request in. So you may have to reach out to them. If you feel that this child may need additional services, you may have to contact the counselor or your special resource teacher at your school so that they can come together and help you work together with the family to create the best plan going forward. So that's another way of overcoming family engagement. I also have diverse activities for parents to participate in. So you can still have your parent-teacher organizations and like advisory committees, but you can also have parents come in and do something as simple as talking to the kids, volunteering in class, or even just sharing some information from their line of work or what they do with the kids, a talent or skill. All of those ways are ways that you can get families engaged in the process. And what we have to do is routinely evaluate and survey the effectiveness of any initiative that we implement, being able to revamp them or replace them as needs and goals change. And how can these things help? By attacking the barriers through multiple means and not giving up on families that may be more challenging to reach. The likelihood that they'll continue affecting engagement goals diminishes greatly. So these are the keys that you should look for when you are trying to engage families. First thing that it has to be pertinent. If it's not something that is meaningful to the families, if it's not targeting that group that you want to serve, then we can just not continue forward with the actual activity. And sometimes we will have things that have been ingrained in the schools that we've done year after year, but we notice participation or feedback is decreasing. It may be time to switch things up because the next generation of parents coming in may not respond to that activity in the same way. Also, we need to make sure that it's personal. A lot of times, families really respond well when you reach out to them with a handwritten note or a phone call or an email letting them know what's going on, different things of that nature that makes it feel like you're speaking to them instead of them just being a number or their kid just being one person in their classroom. So that's important. Also, for participation, if people aren't participating, then most likely they're not engaged. If they're not responding to the surveys or participating in the meetings, or their students aren't responding to the academic success that they should be at, then that participation area is something that needs to be strengthened as well. Permeable. It can't, many of the most effective engagement initiatives that I had actually incorporated things that didn't necessarily target academic areas. The academic areas were secondary. So, for instance, when I was working at my first school, one of the things that they did was they hosted a family dinner. And at the family dinner, that's when the school principal, the administrator, and the parent resource educator and some of the other staff members would talk to them about different things that were going on in the school and what they needed. And then after that, they had a family activity at the end to encourage families to stay. So the actual event wasn't necessarily academically focused, but the goal was. Another thing that we need to make sure is that we see progress. So if our children aren't learning or aren't meeting the standards that our school districts have set, as well as the goals that may be in their IEPs, 504s, or personal academic goals, then that's something that we need to evaluate. We also need to make sure that the progress isn't formulaic and that it allows for room to grow and change in direction based on feedback and results. And then the last thing, which is I think is the most important thing that's really the proof for the previous ones, is the product or your proof. And that growth should be evident. You should be able to measure it. You should be able to see what that looks like, whether it's increased participation in various events, whether it's more feedback being given from families, whether the students are excelling in areas where they've previously been challenged, whether the school is being more recognized in the community. All of these things are ways that you should be able to evaluate how successful your engagement process is. So just to review what family engagement is, that's the definition you see is collaborating relationships between families and schools. We have to go beyond being involved to being engaged, connected, and invited in the learning process. It requires participation, permeability, pertinence, personalization, progress in products, or proof to demonstrate that presence of family engagement. And although different barriers exist to hinder authentic family engagement, using a combination of new technologies, outreach, fact-finding surveys, and traditional methods may be effective in overcoming these barriers. So now the second part of the presentation is going to focus on how do we engage families within our classes and schools. And in this section, I'm going to try to talk about different avenues of what you can actually take home with you and start with using with your classes tomorrow or whenever your school starts. So these are some of the ones that you can use in your classroom or school. The first section is the guest readers. Now, a lot of times, what we would do is we would invite parents to come in and read stories, but we want to figure out ways to engage them if they can't physically make it. One way you could do that is have them pre-record themselves reading the story and then send it to you, and then you upload it on a smart board or a projector, and the kids can actually still get that experience even though the person's not there. If that's not an option, they can also use a live feed to actually be able to engage. That's something that you would have to make sure that's approved through your school district, because I know every district has different policies. But when I was working, we actually had an opportunity to have parents feedback through those means. Also, the live sessions, that could be times that you set aside to come online and talk to parents while they're either helping their children with their homework, or if they have questions about academically related subjects that aren't specific to their child. That would be a great opportunity to try to reach out to them as well. All right, personal narratives. This is something that I feel really can lend itself to family engagement in schools. And this was, whenever I taught this unit in my school, this was one of the things that parents really responded well to. And personal narratives is basically having children tell stories about themselves. So when they're writing these stories, invite parents to come in and see what their children are saying about their favorite time at the beach, or someone that means that's very special to them, different things like that, or a challenging time that they had to overcome, or summer vacation. These are types of things that you can get parents to share in and to just connect with the school in a different way. One thing that one of my my daughter's teachers did, and that I thought was really neat, was a traveling learning kit. And what that was is that she would send home a book that was related to whatever reading level that she was on, and it had a couple of questions that I could ask, very simple questions, as well as some answers and look fors that I would know that she understood what she was reading while she was reading. And as while I was reading it to her, or she would read it with me, what would happen is I would ask her the questions, make note, and let the teacher know what my daughter, how she did, what I thought my thoughts were, what my concerns were, and I would return that, and that would be something that I would do every couple of weeks, a couple of times during a semester. It wasn't every night that the books came home, but it was like maybe once a week we would get a book, or once every 2 weeks, depending on what type of book it was. And that was something that I felt was really meaningful to me, because I could actually see what she was learning in school and seeing where I could support her as a teacher, as a parent. Now, another key point that would take some planning, but it can be a very memorable experience, is a reading advocate or author visit. Getting different field experts of interest to discuss their backgrounds and roles in that reading and literacy played in their current success can motivate those who are reluctant to reading. As a high school student, one of my teachers actually had us connect with a famous poet named Nikki Giovanni. And we, as students, we were studying poetry in the different forms of it. And we actually had a chance to ask her questions. She responded. It was a very memorable experience, one that 20 some odd years later, I still remember how I felt that day. And as a teacher myself, I would invite parents that could do so to come in and talk about their jobs and how it related to the curriculum. One of the parents that I had, she worked for the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and we were studying maps. So what better person to come in and talk about how her job related to what they were learning than this mom that came in and explained it to the students. And the students were highly engaged. I really helped them think and helped them understand how maps work better, as well as the purpose for them in an age where everything is online and digitized. Having a hard-based map, they saw how useful it could still be. Another one that we could use for family engagement is having a collaborative family night. So what we could, and this, like I said, this one again has to take some pre-planning, but I've seen it be successful. As a teacher, I did this myself at my first 2 years in school. And what we were doing is we would partner with like a parent that was involved in the PTO, or another parent that was interested in doing this. And we would work on different skills to model to others visiting the event. So for instance, when we did our math night, I was responsible for coordinating the games, and I would help the parents learn how to play the game, so then that way they could teach other parents and their children how to play the games. For our reading night, we had different activities. So we had I had an online station, so I had to show parents how to navigate the different websites that we use at school and how to access it from home, and that went over very well as well. Another part that would be very important is having a very strong internet presence, regularly updating the website, um, having a private information sharing platform. That's important to protect our students and their personal identifying information, as well as having social media accounts per your district's policy would help to keep up with parents who are more technologically savvy or who would prefer to see a video that you posted on that information sharing site as opposed to having it be on the have missing out on that opportunity. And then I would also encourage you to, when you're thinking about your internet presence, encourage actual feedback. Don't just post things, but have an option for parents to respond to what they're seeing. And that way you can also see how parents feel about their children, maybe presenting about a person that they researched. My daughter, she actually did one on excuse me, Louis Pascal. So that was very powerful for me to be able to see that, even though I wasn't there. Having a communication log that's digitally based is also a strong way of being able to engage families because right then you can have a record of what you've said or sent to those parents, but then also the parents can actually track for themselves some of the content that you've addressed and that their responses as well. That helps you too. And that still, some people can still take a communication log and do it by hand, but just having a digital one can also, it's just a different way of looking at the same tool. We also should have a chance to welcome parents to attend and participate in plays, presentations, school-wide celebrations, and etc. A lot of what we may think is just a part of our everyday experience, families may actually be interested in wanting to see that. So if you're having kids talk about their book reports, maybe you can have some of the family members come in on the days that their child is going to be there presenting, or have it a live feed or recorded. When I did that for a group of parents that I had to work with that were parents who weren't able to be physically there due to their jobs, they really enjoyed being able to see their kids actually in real time learning and expressing the hard work that they've been working on. Another idea that I researched and thought was really cool was the parent camps. This is an initiative created by the U.S. Department of Education, and it's a toolkit for schools to be able to set up their own retreat. It's like a retreat style setup for families in their area, and that way you can actually talk to them about what their needs and concerns are, get the feedback that you need in time enough to be able to take it back to your staff and have that impact and inform your learning, teaching, and outreach engagements. And the final things that schools can do is actually co-tutoring sessions. This is something that I found to be highly effective for parents where schooling and education gaps may be a factor, and they truly appreciated this outreach on my behalf to do this for them, so that way they could feel like they can support their students. Because generally speaking, I've always found that parents want their children to succeed, they love their children, and they want to help them in any way, shape, or form. So now these are the ones that you can suggest to parents that they can do at home to help build their family engagement activities and strengthen literacy. The first one I call the Final Five or the Final 15 for older kids, and that's when you take 5 minutes just to talk about their day, just to get them to express themselves. And what this is doing is that it's building their ability to recount stories, be able to track thoughts, and to be able to tell someone else something that happened, so be able to recall that. So, and that's different from storytelling. Storytelling is similar to the personal narratives, but it's at home. The storytelling aspect is, let's say, they have a great grandma talking to them about what it was like living during that time and how it's different from now, or listening to your mom tell you a story about what happened when you were little, or the dad talking about something that happened to him, his favorite moments from childhood, and then having the child retell the story after they've heard and listened to the story. So that's something that's really important as well. The traveling library is something that I really am an advocate for, and this is a low cost solution for families that may struggle with having resources at home. And there's a lot of research that shows the importance of having a home library. All they would need is a crate that they could probably pick up from a dollar store or a big box store. And what they can do is go to the public library, fill it up with books of interest, both nonfiction and fiction books, and take it home in that crate and keep it in the crate and have them read it. And what I would also encourage with that for families whose language isn't English first, they could use dual language books that can actually be read aloud, as well as audiobooks that you can listen to and hear in their native language as well as in the target language that they're trying to learn. Having parents and families look at reading from their environment aspect, the reading all around strategy, is something that's very good too for younger children as they're building their literacy skills. What I would do is encourage parents to use sales ads, newspaper clippings, any letters that they receive, even driving down the highway, looking at signs, to still being able to read and recognize that the importance of reading in their daily lives. And then the last one is community book clubs. And public libraries and online meeting groups can help form the book clubs, but that can also be something that's hosted at the school. And this is something that one of our schools started, and the families really enjoyed it. It was almost like a play date where the kids would have their own activities, and the parents would share responsibilities of caring for the kids while they would discuss a book that they read that was either related to their children being successful or related to how they could help their children at home, different things that were related to supporting their students in school. You could also have a child community book club. So if you're going to have a play date, why not have them have a book, read about it, do an activity, and spend some time engaging their friends in a way that they may not otherwise. And so here are the key takeaways that I would like for you to remember from all that we talked about today. Collaborative relationships between all parties are critical to achieving what's best for students. This fact doesn't change the older the students get, as research supports continued engagement from parents throughout the schooling experience. Families must go beyond being involved to being engaged, connected, and invested in the learning process. It's our job as professionals to begin that process, and all parties should be accountable for their roles in the process. Pertinence, participation, permeability, personalization, progress in product or proof are evidences that authentic engagement is happening in the classroom and school. New strategies must accompany traditional ones to maximize potential reach for families to feel welcome in engaging in transforming and improving the education of their children. And efforts to increase family engagement in school and in their own homes are not in vain, as small, consistent experiences pay back in positive achievement and growth for students. I hope that the information that was shared today will be something that you will be able to take and use in your classrooms and schools. And I am thankful for your time. I'm going to turn this section back over to Emily so that she can tell you some more things that are coming up.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Rashawnda. This was some really great ideas and some actionable information, as you said, that we can start using in our classrooms. whenever our students may be back. For many of us, that's now. So we're going to just give you a second to get a drink of water, and Rashawnda does have a cold today, so we really appreciate her powering through this information when she's not feeling her best. So we'll give her a quick little break. She is showing you all of those resources there on that slide, and we will be sending you a copy of the slide deck so that you can access those and learn more on your own as well. I also just want to mention, again, thanking our sponsor, Big Universe, for bringing Rashawnda to us today and allowing her to share all this information. She mentioned the importance of, having an at-home library, and that's something that Big Universe can provide for your students. A subscription to Big Universe includes unlimited access to more than 11,000 leveled ebooks for every student, teacher, and family in the school. And it is a school-wide subscription. It's not based on number of students or number of users, so your entire school can take advantage of it wherever they are because Big Universe works on any device that's connected to the internet, and so if students are at home or sitting on a park bench where there's Wi-Fi, they can be reading with that. 70% of the collection is nonfiction, and you can search for and pair books to students based on their reading level using Lexile, Fontes and Pinnell, and other reading level systems. You'll also find tools for writing, quizzes, and student management and sharing in there. So right now, we're doing a special offer on Big Universe. It's part of our Cosmic Readers program. And so for just $2.99, your school can get a full subscription to Big Universe for 90 days. And it comes with a guarantee that that's going to increase reading in your school. And one of the ways we know that it's going to do that for you is we're going to also provide you with an Ignite Reading Playbook that provides directions and resources for 4 reading challenges designed to motivate students to read more. And several of those challenges do have a family engagement component to them where the families are asked to read right along with their students, or parents' contributions to the reading contributes to the student's success. So the Ignite Reading Playbook ties in really nicely with many of the things that Rashawnda has talked with us about today. So I encourage you to go to biguniverse.com to learn more. You can also schedule a personal tour or demo at biguniverse.com/contact, and you'll also find more information about that Ignite Reading Playbook right on the home page. So Rashawnda, if you are ready, we will take some of the questions that have come in, and those of you in the audience, if more come up for you, please go ahead and send them in, and we'll get them over to Rashawnda. So first off, do you have suggestions for trying to connect with parents who can't or won't come into the classroom because of, as you already pointed out, busy schedules, multiple jobs, just not being able to get into the classroom for those parent-teacher conferences or for some of that in-class work?
Okay, well, I can talk to you about what I've done, and hopefully it will help you. For some of our parents that were reluctant to coming into the classroom, what I would do, a lot of that does, I would say, first starts off by the beginning of the year, really building and reaching out to them. A lot of times, what I would do is I would say, hey, I'm going to be at Chick-fil-A or a local restaurant from this time to this time. Could you come and meet with me there? Or I had a family who ran a restaurant, and that's how they paid their bills. So in the restaurant business, that's all they could do. And so what I would do is I would take my folder or my time to go to that restaurant and sit down and eat a meal with them. Also, this is where speaking with your, if you have a parent liaison at the schools where you work, they have different resources that could actually reach out to those families as well. But I would just say continue to just try to build that bridge and make them feel comfortable about it. A lot of times when I found that when parents are apprehensive, it's usually because all they've heard is bad news. And while that can be challenging, and I've had some situations where I've had children that had some very challenging behaviors and had some had their reputation preceded them, unfortunately, I would try to find ways to build their confidence to let them know that I'm here to help them and not to shame them or criticize them. That's not my position as an educator. My position as an educator is to help them grow into the best individuals as possible and to assist you as much as my professional capacity allows me to do that. So it could take some unique ways of reaching out to them to show that you're there and that you're committed for them. If it's a language barrier issue, again, one of my students, their families, the reason why they didn't come is because they were afraid of being able to not communicate with me. And so that's where that pre-planning went in. I was like, hey, I need a translator to come in to speak Spanish for me, because even though I knew some personally, I didn't know enough to communicate with this particular parent. And it was very important because this particular parent had a student who we wanted to identify as gifted, but she wouldn't sign the papers because she thought it was a negative process. And so those are just some of the ways that I would suggest to try to engage families that may be reluctant. It really starts from the beginning of the year to emphasize how much you are there for them, as well as showing up to events at school from time to time that may not necessarily be academically related, such as like the fundraisers, or if a family has, like, they have the parents' night out where they have different restaurants who are ordering, contributing money to their to the school for X amount of money that you're buying. If you spend $20, they give the school $5 or something. Those are ways that I found to connect with parents as well.
Those are great ideas, and I think you pointed to something really important of just kind of taking the intimidation factor out of it. Sometimes walking into that empty classroom for parent-teacher conference and you're behind the desk and they're in front of you in the little chairs, it's intimidating. So I love the idea of kind of getting out of that school environment and going, like you said, to Chick-fil-A or a local restaurant, or just something that is just more, puts you more on a peer level with those families, and to have a conversation that is more relaxed. So thank you. Those are great ideas. What's your opinion of using Facebook or Twitter or other social media channels to communicate with parents?
Okay, so that's a great question. I think as educators, any tool like that can be powerful in that they're already using it. So you having a platform on there is a great one. I would check your school's or your district's policy on that, because every school policy, every district is very different. One district that I worked in, they didn't allow us to communicate on that at all with parents. They wanted us to use the school system's specified the specified software that they had for communicating with parents. But if your school system or your school allows you to do that, I would definitely first make sure that it has the highest privacy settings, particularly so that you protect yourself personally, as well as the people who opt into the group. Secondly, particularly with Facebook, they have ways that you can screen any posts. So if you notice that, let's say I've seen instances where parents would use that to vent about another issue that their child has with another child, you can shut that down. I'll also leave the Facebook, the Twitter posts to general reminders or things that may be happening in the classroom that you have permission to share on that particular website. But I would be very careful with making sure that all the settings are private, so that way the only people that are supposed to see it are those who've opted in to it and those who you have given permission to do so. But I think it's a good tool that can reach out to families in ways that they might not receive from a flyer or a robocall.
Yeah, and I think, again, just sort of trying to make it feel like you're a community as a classroom, and I think those tools are all about community. So, yes, you need to be careful about how you use them and the rules around that, but yeah, I agree. I think it could be a nice way to pull some folks in. So how do you recommend, or have you had situations where you're trying to give parents ideas, to help them engage more with their children and have that educational experience at home? So how do you give those without seeming like you're trying to tell the parents what to do?
Okay. Well, I will say this. There's only so much that you can do as an educator to reach out. It does, like I said, it has to be shared. So the best way that I've found with strategies is to get the kid to. It's kind of like selling it to the child, and then they go home and nag their parents about it. So it's, for instance, my daughter came home and she was really into this program that they were using to help with building their basic words, their excuse me, their Dolch words. So she really was adamant about talking about it day in and day out, day in and day out. And so we began using it more, and then I found, oh, okay, this is not so bad after all. With me, my kids, when I had some students that were struggling with remembering the vocabulary, I would set it up as a game and have it prepackaged and send it home so that they didn't have to worry about the materials or different things like that. One of the games that I created was like a see, say, and write game, and it was really simple. It was their vocabulary words on the card. Had some stickers for prizes, like some dollar store stickers I stuck in there, and wrote the instructions for the families. Had them say, hey, look, if you bring this back, your child can get an extra point towards this. And it was always something that they could earn. It was never something to be negative towards, like, the child that may not have had that participation. But if it's something that the kids are buying into and they nag their parents about it, most likely they'll follow through with it, because they don't want their kids to keep talking about it. They want to, and then if they see that their kids are excited about it and then they engage in it, usually it helps to transform their thinking about it. And then they're like, oh, okay, so I'm looking forward to the next thing that comes home. I hope that helped.
Yeah, I think that was a good idea, and I think it also points to the importance of involving the children in their own education too. So it really is collaborative with the teacher, the parent, and the students.
Right.
Everybody's in it together to make it work.
Child, because they're the one that's having the educational experience. So that's a very important component of it.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we have gotten through our questions, and that we're just about at our time. So thank you again, Rashawnda, for providing all of this information. And folks, again, we'll be sending out the slide deck so you can access all of Rashawnda's suggestions and those resources that she provided links to. I also just want to remind you, or let you know, to mark your calendar for our next professional learning webinar, which is coming up on September 13th. That's going to be with Dr. Monica Burns, and she's going to talk with us about using technology to boost student engagement. So that should be very interesting and informative, and again, some great strategies that you can start using here at the beginning of the school year. So thanks everyone for joining us, and one last thanks to Rashawnda, and I hope you get to feeling better soon.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure being able to be with everyone and to the great questions that I got. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Bye everyone. Have a great afternoon.